Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Zoe Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance.
So I've been riding bridleless and with a neck rope or ring for about 6 or 7 years on and off, and it's really opened up my eyes to thinking about head and neck posture and position without the bit, as well as, how my horse's biomechanics change when I am riding either bitless or bridleless. And, with the recent competition, the recent bridleless competition that there was in the UK, it really shows that bitless and bridleless riding is a valid way of competition, and that it should be included as a valid way of competition. And over in the Netherlands, they allow bitless riding in dressage, and we're fighting to get it over here just in the low level in Australia, just in the low level competitions. You're allowed to ride bitless in working equitation, and show jumping, but you're not allowed to ride in dressage. And it just seems really crazy to me because, I see the difference in horses, and I've done a lot of dissections, and I see the physical implications and what it does. And I would really love to see us having more options here in Australia of bitless and bridleless opportunities in all competitions. And I'd love to see that as some options.
Absolutely. And it's wonderful to see that people have done the work to create that, and that whether it's the regulating body or somebody has made it possible. Of course, there's always discussion about, does insurance let us do this kind of stuff? But advocating and showing that as you said, it's a valid way of riding and competing. And Tori Jeffress, I loved the slogan she used to use, bitless with every bit of control. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're giving up safety when you have decided to try a less, something like bitless or bridleless, as opposed to using a bit or a bridle, because in order to get to that point, often there are different ways of training, but people who have been able to create a really great relationship with their horse, and they've done the work to make sure that their horse is balanced and can handle themselves well in environments. They're really well prepared horses. You actually are safer because you're not relying on mouthpieces or bridles to keep you safe, which realistically we can convince horses and sort of manipulate situations to keep us safe in a way, but we're always less safe than if we have a partnership with our horse. So very grateful that people are creating the opportunities, because we get to see what's possible. The evidence that we've seen at the recent competition are, it's all just data that we get to use to point out, hey, look what can be done. It's beautiful. And some things that I noticed at this competition from the footage is that we can talk about common beliefs or themes in mainstream equestrian that sometimes we say, well, it can only be done this way, it can only be done that way. One thing that we've seen is that collection is possible without a high head carriage. There was some really beautiful self-carriage in this competition, and the horses have a maybe slightly higher than neutral head position, but where we're really focusing is the base of their neck, and they are lifted nicely and softly with a controlled posture that still leaves them with an open throat latch and a happy expression. And so, one, it's been great evidence on a more public stage, because there are obviously anybody who's come to this competition and competed is already doing this work at home. And if you're paying attention, there are great examples of people who are doing this work and trying to support others in bringing it to, making it more available for people to learn and try new things and clinics and great spaces. So one, grateful for that, but also wonderful to see there's been a positive reception. I know that the comments from the organisers were that they were surprised by the amount of spectators and the fact that they sold out their tickets, and that it was a really positive atmosphere and it was just like any other horse show, which again is great evidence, because as they commented, this wasn't, some event where there's no kids running up and down the stands. They said, there were children everywhere, there were people chatting, people clapping, and the horses were really well prepared. So it wasn't any less controlled than your average horse show. There weren't, horses running off without their bridle on. It was a really well put together event. So yeah, very, very grateful for that.
Yeah, and like some of the posts of bridleless of the riders, like dressage and show jumping, had like 30,000 likes. And I saw post after post after post like that. And for me, it was very heartwarming. Like it made me quite emotional, because I feel like it's in Australia still a bit of a minority. And I've been lucky to know and work with Tori Jeffries, bridleless, and with Kim from Heartland Equestrian. She was really instrumental in me learning how to go bridleless. I mean, and there are bad moments, and this is why you should be really well prepared when you go bridleless. And I'm going to share a funny moment because it was pretty funny. So with Pat, there was a couple of funny moments because I didn't really know the process at that point, right? Like I hadn't learned about the process of going bridleless. So I was like, okay, we'll just take the bridle off. And this horse had a bridle on for 13 years. Probably had been ridden in a halter, right? Because she was a pony club horse, but she'd never been ridden without bridle. And so Brett's like, you don't have control. And anyway, I showed him, I can walk between the trees and I can back up. And he was like, okay, all right, yeah. Okay, you seem to have control. Then we go to my lessons, and I rode around bitless first, I think. And then Kim said, okay, I'm going to hop on bridleless and bareback, mind you, bridleless and bareback. I don't even think I had a bareback pad. I was purely bareback. And she's like, oh, you sure you don't want to leave the bridle on? I was like, no, it'll be fine. Well, as I was going to get on, there was people coming down the hill, and I could see that Patch was a little bit like, oh, what's going on? I think it was one of the first times I'd ever taken her to a clinic as well. So I hop on. She gets this fright and she takes off. And I was thinking, oh, shit. We're on the short side of the arena. We were in an arena. That's a good start. We were on the short side of the arena, and I was thinking, do I bail or do I not? Anyway, I made it around the corner. So I was like, well, I'm still here, and she still had me. And so we did a lap of the arena, and as she went past the spectators, she pig rooted, woo! And then Kim was in the middle, trying to bring the energy down. And then I just flicked the neck rope up a little bit, and she just stopped. And I stayed on, and everything was good. But, there is a process that you should take. Don't just take the bridle off and go, it'll be fine, because you still, Kim now, I think, doesn't do the work with the bridle on. She actually does take the bridle off and then just checks all the cues. First of all, shows the horse how to stop, back up, turn. She tests that a lot. But I have seen now quite a few horses go bridleless for the very first time. I've been lucky enough to be in a heap of clinics where I've seen horses go bridleless for the first time. It is the best moments that I have witnessed with horses and riders, to see that, I don't know, the relief on the horse's face, and the owners, there's still fear because the owners and the riders think that, oh, like, I don't know what's going to happen. The horse is like, hallelujah. Like, there's a freedom, there's a softness. They put their head wherever they feel it needs to be, which for some horses is higher and some horses is lower. But it's like their whole body moves with a different fluidity. It's a different level of connection. And, you know, I can't actually remember when I did it with Jelly for the first time. I think I was a bit more gradual with Jelly because I had an open paddock and not an enclosed area. So I think I did it quite carefully, more careful than I did with that. And he, you know, there was times with both of them where they weren't comfortable bridleless either. You know, so I've seen some beautiful work, and then I've felt moments where we were cantering and she just kept pushing her head forward all the time in the canter. And I was like, what is it? And because she was little and I have a longer upper body, like I couldn't keep the neck ring released on her base of her neck. So anyway, we went to a soft Tellington neck rope, and she was like, she loved it. Her canter just completely changed. Whereas there have been moments with Jelly where the pressure on the base of his neck has not been comfortable for him. And so we do have to recognize that for some horses, the pressure on the base of their neck may be, they might have arthritis there, they might have a malformation in their neck, they may just not be able to move those vertebrae in a functional way. And so we do need to recognize that it's not for every horse. But what are some of the differences that you noticed in terms of like conflict behaviors when you watch fighting?
So definitely some, you know, conflict behaviors can include mouth opening. So I think something that we saw that was really great at this competition is that it was evidence of horses doing hard work without their mouth opening, because often we blame effort for this, either a gaping mouth or a lot of mouth tension as well, or chewing on the bit, or exposing their teeth. Some horses, particularly if they've had the drop nose band on and the mouthpiece, then all they can really do is open their mouth. So what they'll do is they'll just kind of open their lips right where their incisors are, and you can see their incisors. So, and people can blame that on effort, but really it's a situation where the horse is having an experience where they can't truly find relief from some form of pressure or discomfort, truly. So if, you know, this was great seeing that, you know, that horses doing hard work can have a quiet mouth. Another one is eye tension. So we often see this triangular, it's, you would describe it, you know, once you can read an expression, you would call it a concerned or stressed eye. But if you were describing it, it's a triangular shape of the eye rather than a soft round shape, and often at the top crease of the eye, so on the inside of the corner of the eye, you get this sort of pointed wrinkle look. And now I have seen a couple of horses who have a really big eyebrow, and so, you know, they look always a little bit expressed when they kind of turn their head, that little bit wrinkles, even when they're, you know, getting a piece of carrot or something. But I have seen people always say, my horse, you know, it's just the way, the shape of his face. But I've only seen a couple of horses where I've noticed that. And I think for the most part that, you know, the eye shape is a good indicator. And it's sometimes the first things that I see when I'm training, if I've pushed too hard, is either, you know, talking about eye tension, but also where the horse is looking. And so If they're having a hard time acknowledging something, or they don't want to look at some particular part of their exercise, they don't want to investigate the pole you want to step over, you'll often see eye tension with that. And so again, I'm coming back to some pictures that I saw from this recent bridleless competition. There was some horses working with this lovely expression. They're looking forward at the next jump and their eye is open, and they have this lovely soft curve through their head and neck, because that is how, if they weren't being manipulated, they would look towards something on this lovely soft bend rather than kind of like a right angle at their jaw, or looking at eye tension, which mouth opening, mouth tension, tail swishing, definitely. Now, of course, that isn't something to do with a bridle or a bit, but it's a very
But it
great
can be.
Okay, it can be in connection, definitely. When you're using mouth tension, or you see moments, particularly when people land at the jump, horses do switch their tail right after you come out of it. Looking to see whether or not you've got a tail swish, particularly either at a specific movement, or there's a ringing tail as well, where it kind of like swings around in a circle, and brace in the lower back. So that can often, it can look like a hollow lower back, or just really tight and stringy. How would you describe people can observe brace in the lower back?
Sometimes it can look raised in that lumbar area. And just the few that I watched, they had a soft flow through their body, and there just didn't seem to be a stop behind the saddle. And obviously saddle fit and other things are going to implicate that. But I really think what's happening in the mouth and the head has a massive influence on how that hind end can engage and how the back can lift. So, just looking directly behind the saddle there.
Another conflict behavior I've thought of that isn't maybe as obvious. I do remember hosting a workshop last year with a horse, and the owner said, I had a problem. He's been lovely. The only problem I have is he bolts while I'm leading him with the halter. Sometimes he'll just switch off and run off. But she said, I figured out that he never ever did it with the bridle on. And so my trainer said, well, just use the bridle. And I think there was value in that, because she said they've been able to use it as a crutch for a little while we ended up figuring out that there's some kind of emotional component, and now she's been able to do more training and change so that she doesn't need to use the bridle all the time. But in the moment, we were wondering, why is this horse has got no curiosity? He doesn't even want to turn and look at me while I'm working with him. And when we took the bridle off and the bit off, it was a totally different horse. Immediately, like, oh, I'm back in my body. He had just glazed over and switched off.
Yeah.
That in itself is another behavior that you can observe if if the bit and bridle has some kind of relevance to the horse that isn't.
Yeah, what their reactions are when they've got it on compared to when they've got it off.
I think it's great to have pieces of tack that when you put them on, they're all neutral. The horse can be in the same emotional state that they were, a positive one, or feel quite neutral about it when you put it on, as opposed to taking it off.
Yeah, I remember the first time I put the bitless bridle on Jelly, and his bridle didn't fit him that well around his ears that he had. But I remember the first time I put the bitless bridle on, and it was strange. I didn't expect it, but he just relaxed. Like, he licked and he chewed, and his whole face softened, and it was just not an expression that I'd seen when I'd put the bridle on. Like, usually it was a bit of a hardened expression. And I haven't ridden him in a bit since that moment, because I just don't need to, and because I understand from a biomechanics perspective that if your horse has hind-end issues, which Jelly has lumbar challenges and hind-end challenges, that if we put pressure on the tongue, we're actually making it even harder for that hind end to work, because from an anatomical perspective, which we've looked at under dissections, is that when there's pressure on the tongue, it changes the ability to stride through the hind legs. And I do this in my dissection because of Sharon May Davis. And, you know, I used to do it with a bit, and I used to do it with some different bits, but now I just do it with my thumb. And the pressure that I put on the horse's tongue is about, if you just lay your thumb over your forearm, it's that pressure, just the thumb laying on your forearm. And I can clearly, the people who are moving the back leg can clearly recognize when I just put that amount of pressure, which is not even the pressure of a bit sitting on the tongue often, depending on the shape of the bit and the tongue, or sitting on the bars, it's such a small amount of pressure. And every time that I go around and show the students this is how much pressure I was using, every time they're like, is that it? Is that all? Like, that's not even the pressure of my hands holding the reins. And, you know, I've seen it time and time again. And that's one thing that I noticed in the show jumping especially, and the dressage, but was the freedom through the hind end, the regularity of the stride and the relative stride length of the hind end compared to the front end. Now, often what I see in dressage and show jumping is that the hind limbs there's a shorter, like they're not going through a good strong stride. They don't have a good push-off point. And often the stride is not as true as what it could be. And then in dressage, we see this bigger stride in the front end and smaller stride in the back end. And I just didn't see that. Okay, they were lower level, but even I see that at lower level in dressage with a bit. And so that was a big thing that stood out for me, which I've seen demonstrated in different ways how the stride length has changed. I also noticed a difference biomechanically in their jumping techniques. So, and I've seen this before because there's a horse, Un-Bridled Wings, someone I followed for a really long time, with a horse called Vlad. They have videos of him show jumping before she took him bridleless. He was difficult, like pulling, rushing, you know, all the things that would make you think, well, I need to put a stronger bit on this horse because I cannot control it. When I saw him jumping bridleless, he was fluid, rhythmical, controlled. He had beautiful posture over the jump. And this is what I noted in the bridleless competition was the bascule of horses over the jump, the beautiful posture, the extension of the head and neck. What you also said, their ability as they're coming into the jump to see, because as soon as we put a horse in flexion on the vertical, we change their vision massively. Horses need their head up to be able to see, and horses want to see. It is part of their safety and balance mechanism. And I noticed in the show jumping, all the horses were looking at the jump, not at the last minute, because I think some horses rush at the jump at the last minute because they're just trying to see. Like, they're just trying to see, well, what am I facing next? Whereas all these horses had the freedom to see, so they just didn't rush at the jump. And the riders, because they weren't relying on the reins, they were supporting themselves. And so the other thing that I noticed is there were so many moments where the neck rope was completely released off the horse's neck. Like, so many moments where there was no pressure. We can never do that with a bit. We can't even do it with a bitless bridle because, like, the noseband's still on the horse. We still have a connection with the reins. And so, you know, there's nothing that can mimic that true release of pressure than what letting go of a neck rope or a neck ring can do for a horse. They have to hold their own balance. There's nothing for them to lean on. That's why Linda Tellington-Jones has ridden horses for, like, whatever, she's 99 now, so 80, 70 years, you know, why she's ridden bridleless she's been a pioneer for it for many, many years, because she was helping horses to find a better posture and showing how calm and responsive they could be without the level of control that we think that we need, which was based on tradition and based on often, really having to control a horse in the moment, for example, at war, where it's a life or death situation. Whereas now we just did an episode which will be released about the responsibility of us as horse owners. We can do better in this space. We can do a lot better in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forgot what I was about to say. What I wanted to add was the fact that, you're talking about how you've gone about introducing it for, how you introduced it for Patch, and then how it was different for Jelly, and it'll be, as while you're introducing things to Ellie, you've learnt and tried things, new ways of introducing things, and you've got some great mentors. I had somebody a few years ago who we were discussing methods of training tackless or bridleless work, and because it's a part of a lengthy process. You have to train the horse as a whole. It's not just the bridleless part. You still have to do all the other training that comes along with them. So she was showing me, she has done a master's in looking at training methods, and she's also done research on the processes. But she was explaining how that when she was evaluating training methods, that when watching videos, turning the sound off was very useful. So she would turn the sound off and then watch the videos and look at what the person was doing and look at how the horse responded and look at their expression as they did it. And so she was explaining how we watched some very impressive tackless work, bridleless bareback work, and she was showing me how during certain moments, every time the horse would do a certain move, there would be this uncomfortable or negative expression where the horse's ears would be flat back and their mouth would be really pinched. And then she compared that to the same person doing videos in a bridle with a saddle on. And so you could see in those moments that the horse was having the exact same responses at the same time that somebody is putting quite a lot of pressure on the leverage bit, and then using spurs to get this impressive roll back and then take off again. So there's the foundational training. The best form that we would be, advocating and cheering on is going to be a peaceful start and a peaceful background as well, because that is going to influence how the horse really feels about their experience of being bitless, or bridleless, or bareback. And so, yeah, we also discussed the fact that when you train with methods that use a lot of pressure, that pressure is the reason that the horse is performing in a certain way. So if you use a lot of pressure and then you combine bridleless work, eventually if you only do the bridleless work, the horse begins to test the boundaries of, okay, I don't really need to do that that stuff. There's nothing coming after, I'm not anticipating something that would encourage me to do the movement. So that is a time when you can start to see things showing up as like, okay, the horse can show behaviors that they can't when you are using tack. So one, that's something that we can notice if we decide to take our bridle off and the horse is like immediately got their head on the ground, or they're immediately like, no, I'm not going to stop. Or we take our spurs off and they say, no, I'm not going to go forward. You realize that your motivating factor has to be quite extreme before your horse is willing to do it. And that is not the definition of a willing horse in a peaceful manner. That is a coerced horse, because we have to use something to really, we have to say, you can't prioritize your own physical comfort, because you have something bigger and badder to think about, basically.
Yeah, for me, you take off the bridle, whether you, like, obviously when you're going bridle bitless, there's different aids for turning, so they have to get used to the difference in the aids. But aside from that, so we'll say, you know, they understand the basic aids because you've worked with that on the ground: stop, go, turn, left, right. Aside from that, what I notice when you go bitless or bridleless is that as long as the horse hasn't been trained to go in a specific posture like what you're talking about, then they generally will show where their true posture is. And sometimes it's really ugly, you know, because they show their true posture is head up in the ground. And then you're like, well, fundamentally, you don't need the bit to create that better posture. You have to ask why that's their neutral posture, is head up in the air and back hollowed out. Like, why is that happening? And the same thing when they plunge their head down towards the ground when you take them bitless or bridleless. Like, why is that their go-to posture? Are they offloading their hind end? Are they uncomfortable in their neck? Are they, you know, trying to release pressure somewhere else? And Jelly's was up, so he would put his head up, and Patches was down to the ground. And so I worked with them, not riding them, to help them find both of them to find a better, more functional, neutral posture. And then when I rode them, that just happened, you know, like I didn't have to do anything to create that. So
self-carriage, because it is
it highlights you where they're actually at. And I know, like, my neighbor plays around with her horse bridleless too, and she's like, you know, actually he goes better bridleless than he does in the bridle. And I'm like, yeah, because he can put his head and neck where he needs it to be for his own balance. And you know, and she's not a person that controls the head and neck anyway, but like, that's the difference when they're bitless and bridleless, is that they put their head and neck where they need it to be to help them balance and create posture. And so if you're getting an unsightly head and neck position, then you've got to ask, where's my fundamental breakdown here in how I'm training my horse's posture? So it's actually really great feedback. But yeah, I recommend that you try it in a controlled environment and that you understand how to transition between the bit and bridle to keep yourself safe. I've seen so many courses since the bridleless competition. I've seen so many courses advertised saying, you know, about helping people go bridleless. I mean, I recommend Kim from Heartland Equestrian, Karen Rolfe. You know, there's Tori Jeffries, there's like some of those people, you know, they've been riding bridleless for years and years and years. It's like just part of their everyday relationship. I'll just say one last thing that I've seen, which was super impressive at a clinic. And it was a lady who's been riding bridleless for quite some time. And she also does Liberty with her horse. And she hopped on without the neck rope. No neck rope, no bridle, no nothing. Just, I think that she had one stick, maybe. But her horse just went off her seat. And it was beautiful. It's the first time she'd done it. And it was so lovely. Like, and she was in an arena and she's ridden her horse bridleless in a neck rope for years and years. And yeah, it was just a really beautiful moment to see the horse stop, go, turn, all just with the movement of her body, and didn't need any control over its head and neck. So, you know, there's no limit.
No, and we did see
I think we just need to trust the horses a bit more, but also go through the right processes to be safe 100%.
Yeah, and there were some really beautiful examples of very light, connected, balanced riders that in this ladies bridleless competition too, because you have
to take that responsibility too, again, for
Yes.
our own balance and our own stability, 100%.
Yeah, and it does make you think too. It's quite an interesting concept to be connected to somebody's head. You know, with dogs, we have a collar around their neck because it would, if you saw, you know, we use muzzles, but if you
use halties though.
Yeah, they're the little ones for their face, but you know, it's more common to see a dog in a harness than it is to see, you know, with a full face piece. But there's no horse really anywhere that doesn't have a halter on, and you're connected to somebody's, the most sensitive part of their body, like their lips and their eyes and their ears and their face and their sense organs. So, you know, it's just something to be thoughtful about, even if you aren't somebody who is about to transition out of it. But how do you pick up the lead? How do you work with the bit or your whatever headgear your horse is wearing? How are you treating it?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I've played with Ellie on the ground, just putting the neck rope on her and asking her to turn, back up, go, you know, just with the neck rope, because I mean, my plan is that one day I'll ride her bridleless as well, and right now I don't have any plans to put a bit in her mouth. I never will say never, because things change and choices change, but I just don't have any reason to need to do that right now, and I think that I should be able to have the same control with, you know, bitless or bridleless or whatever, as long as I've trained my horse the right way. So yeah, play with your horse on the ground. Check those things before you hop on. You know, Zimmer rings, they have beautiful neck rings. So I recommend if you're interested to look into them. There's lots of options out there. And like I said, some horses prefer more firm, some horses prefer it softer. One last thing before. We have to consider, you get more control by flicking the neck ring up high, right? But what we have to remember is that from about a third of the way down their neck, really superficially there is their trachea. And so, yep, you'll get the horse to stop, because you're basically, like, if you put pressure there on your trachea, it's uncomfortable, you're going to stop. So if you need to do that with your horse all the time, then you need to go back to basics, because flipping it up there to get control is like it's like doing a one rein stop. You know, it's there for really if you need it, but it should not be something that you need to do often and rely on, because that is just as sensitive as having a bit on the tongue. So, you know, train your horse properly so that they know how to accept the pressure in the right places, and that you can release that pressure, because it can also have detrimental effects when it's used the wrong way on those sensitive structures.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vandenberg in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so we can share more valuable insights. Reach out with any listener requests for any topics that you'd like to hear us talk about. And if you're a business aligned with our mission, then reach out to become a sponsor of the podcast.
And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.